Hey everybody, welcome back to Event About It, the Dynamic Dialogue Aftershow. I'm your host, Megan Martin, and I am here today with Aleksandra Panyukhina. For anyone just joining us in the Aftershow, we owe you a quick intro. Aleksandra is the Experience Marketing Director at Pixelz, where she leads Flow, a strategic marketing initiative that combines owned flagship events, a local meetup series, a community, and a podcast all under one umbrella. But if that wasn't enough, she also supports the partnerships and ABX teams. With over 12 years building event-led growth programs across 5 continents, she's driven millions in pipeline and closed-won revenue through experiences that go well beyond logistics. She runs global programs spanning US and EMEA with a lean team and treats events not as a marketing function, but as a core go-to-market motion. And fun fact, she's also a professional salsa dancer and teacher. And if you listen to the main episode, you know exactly why that matters. So let's get into it. So when you stopped being a professional athlete at 23, did you know sort of who you were without competition yet? And what I mean by that is we've interviewed other professional athletes who kind of get lost after they compete because competing and being a professional athlete becomes so much of who they are and their identity. So how did that transition work for you?
Oh, I guess that's when I picked up salsa. For all of my athletic determination and the need to excel at something. And I'm only half kidding. I actually do believe that I found the replacement in that hobby that I took very, very seriously and ultimately started teaching and really became kind of in that small community of Cuban salsa in Europe. I've become pretty recognizable. But in terms of knowing who I am, I think I did a pretty good job of still existing outside of sport, or at least if not outside, but having an identity as a person, not just as an athlete. Though I must say, I remember that feeling of graduating into real life, and in real life things are not black and white like it is while you are an athlete, because if you win it's all white, if you lose or if you have injury it's all black. So you have two options: you're either ecstatic and happy or everything is absolutely devastating. But the regular life on a day to day, it's gray. And I think that the need for that emotional imbalance and really big differences has stayed with me for quite some time. The need to compete, to win and be the best at whatever I do. I can't say I got rid of that up until today. So it definitely leaves an imprint on who you are and on your personality. But the the opportunity that opened up when you don't have a very precise schedule for, a 6, 8 months ahead, really was something that was quite exciting and interesting to finally get your hands on.
I can only imagine. Yeah, that's a lot. And I love that you say the psychology of competing, being the best. I think that translates in a very good way to the rest of your life, really. Have you ever thought about competing for salsa dancing, or that's just a fun
No.
outlet for you?
Yeah, I was definitely done with competing. I didn't want more of that in my life. And luckily, the Cuban salsa that I am into, it's not that there aren't that many competitions, but there of course are some because people invent them. But I never wanted to be part of it. I had very different reasons for why I wanted to be part of salsa community.
Yeah, I love that. Well, one thing you mentioned in the main episode was when you were finishing your athletic career, you had been working in events, plus you have a marketing degree in education. So, with all of that in mind, what were you seeing in events that made you think, like, this is where I want to be? I intentionally want to go into, event marketing, go to market motions. Was there a specific moment that you were like, yes, this is my next future?
It was actually interesting because I kind of really remember the moment when it clicked for me. I was on a plane, and I usually never talk to anyone who sits next to me. But the thing is that our plane went through the thunderstorm, was hit by by a lightning, so it kind of creates certain camaraderie with people around you. And when
Absolutely.
we were traveling back, it turned out I was the same person again on the plane, so we started talking, and she told me amazing stories about friends of hers who were working with these huge conferences, and they were more on like minds and destination management, but that kind of was the aha moment for me. Like, events, doing all these crazy things like painting a bike in gold and then realizing that the parts don't match together, so you have to like unscrew and clean up the paint for the whole night. It's like that's fascinating. I want to do that. That sounds so good, and you get paid for this. But then the other part was I definitely knew I want to travel, and I want my job to give me the opportunity to keep traveling because I got used to that. I had to be on the go. But I also knew that I want to work in tech because when I finished with sports, that was 2014. So, tech was on the rise, Google, startups, all that. So that's where the money is, not hiding the fact. So, okay, marketing, events, tech. How does it all work together? Did a little bit of research. Okay, great. Companies are using events to drive business, to promote their brand. This is what I'm going to do. What are the companies where I can get started?
I think that's incredible. I wish most people had stories like that. I think most of us fell into this and we kind of navigated our way and fumbled our way through it, but you were so intentional and I absolutely love that. So, one of the other things you've said recently is you talked about the zone of genius. And I'm definitely stealing this, giving you all the credit for it, but you use that phrase and we've talked about it in context of there are logistics operators and there are strategic operators. And most companies really try to make their event person one and the same. And that's almost a left brain, right brain thing for me. So talk about why that middle and having to do strategy and logistics in one isn't always the best. And when you talk about zone of genius, what does that mean?
So to start with Zone of Genius, and it's also not my invention, so everyone gets a credit. Let's not be greedy in that sense. And Zone of Genius is where your skills and your abilities are a level higher than anybody else can do, at least that you know of. Of course, there are people who would match you, but it's a significantly smaller percentage of who can do it. And the way to put it in the context, I know that my zone of genius is specifically connecting business objectives, revenue objectives with the experience design and what needs to be created, and also ensuring that all of the teams that need to work on that and be part of it actually know how they are involved and how to wrap it all together. But honestly, there are much better people, much better specialists who know how to um, get catering and handle all the different operations and branding and so on. Can I do it? Yes, I can. Will it be making me thrive and give me energy? No, it's so totally draining, and I just want to slam my laptop and never do that ever again. But the previous part, even when I talk about it, when I think about it, this really gives me energy. When I get a new idea, when I hear something on a town hall or the company's strategy meeting, and I hear something and it just like all the dots start connecting. It's like this matrix in the machine. Like this. That's what we need to focus on. That's where we need to pivot. How can we do it? What do we need? Okay, look at the numbers, look at the data. Does it prove that? So this is just gets me so excited. I can spend the whole night doing it. Not the
I love
catering
that.
stuff.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. I have done it. I can
Mhm.
do a pretty good job at it, but like you, my brain very much wants to
Yeah.
connect all the dots and think a little bit broader.
Yeah, and I don't want to compare, like, especially in the context of event industry, to compare these two as one is better than the other. No. And I absolutely admire people who actually run huge events with crazy traffic. I don't do that. I've never done that. I don't have the ambition to do it because that's where you need your zone of genius needs to be in that specific area.
You need both, and you need experts in both areas. And there are many, many event professionals out there I know that love the logistics and the details
Yes.
and the operations. And I love that for them. It's not for everybody, but we need them, and every team needs that expert on their team for sure. Okay, so thinking about the event industry in general, you talk a lot about on LinkedIn about its evolution and how we talk about ROI and just the role of event marketers in companies. Not a lot of people talk about it in terms of go-to-market motions and business growth. And one thing I think we both definitely agree on is that the industry shows, insert alphabet soup, there's dozens of them out there, are not really serving event professionals in that strategy way. There's a ton of sessions about operations and the zone of genius around execution. But what do you think that shows like maybe IMEX or PCMA or MPI need to do to better prepare event marketers to have those go-to-market conversations and those business conversations with their C-suite?
So I think that there needs to be the recognition of how different the world of event agencies, event management, and destination management, and even sometimes they say corporate. There needs to be very clear distinction and recognition, and each target group, and now I will speak for B2B event and field marketers. The reason I also put them together because I think at companies under three, 400 people, usually event and field marketing are bundled together in one group. Uh, Bigger companies that would have also regional teams and really diversified regional strategy and regional teams, both on sales, on marketing front, they would have dedicated field teams and they would normally have a global event team that is in charge of brand events and establishing the golden standard that is then being translated into field and into regions, but then field teams actually are much more connected to sales. But if you're under 350, honestly, you're doing event and field marketing. And if you're a cold event marketer, then you're technically doing field marketing. And if you're a cold field marketer, probably 80% of your job are events. So if we're talking about this particular group, and I only take responsibility for speaking for that group because that's where I am. I don't pretend like I know everything as in the event industry. It's way too big and way too diverse. There needs to be a track that puts us in line with marketing. And so far, that's not happening either at those events like IMAX or events like Inbounds, that is now Unbound, started to do a better job, but I actually wasn't impressed with the way, um, with the selection of topics that they did, because it felt like they brought more of event management topics to the marketing conference rather than marketing topics about leveraging events as a go-to-market. So that there is that whole disconnect. So we need to see more of these focus topics at the pure marketing conferences. I remember when I spoke at some of those, like between Marketing Exchange and a few others, I would be the only person with the topic on the agenda that would be a marketing topic revolving around using events as a channel, and the room was absolutely full and people wanted that, but somehow it just doesn't make it through, and it's really hard to get on the agenda for those events. There are
Yes.
only few organizers that really recognize the need and the importance of it. And this for events like IMAX and others, BTM, they are trying, but it's not a focused agenda. It's not a focused micro event within the event. There are some topics. Last year, I presented at IBTM, thanks to Julius Solaris, who invited me, where they were programming a stage. Uh, and there were some good topics, but very few specifically about B2B event and field marketing. The very few that were directly applicable to that. If you work as a part of the company, you use events to drive revenue. That's very few.
So I think you make amazing points. So do you think marketing conferences like Unbound should drive the charge, or should there be more collaboration between the IBTMs, IMEXs, and say like an Unbound? Like, should there be a collaboration conference between an event and a marketing conference? Like, it's a chicken and egg, because to your point, it's so hard to get on these agendas. It's really hard.
Yeah.
So how do we fix it? Like, in
Yeah.
the ideal hypothetical world, like, what's the dream scenario here?
Mm-hmm. So I don't think that two giants like Unbound and IMAX make sense to collaborate. Their target markets are way too different than the
Right.
150 event and film marketers that they will be able to gather for that particular interest. So I believe there needs to be a dedicated event. There need to be dedicated tracks at the events. However, what I also believe is that there needs to be, I want more of these topics and that dedicated track within the B2B marketing conferences, SaaS conferences. I'm super excited. I'm speaking at a SaaS event next week, and this is a pretty big thing because usually these topics are not covered there, and having the
Right.
ability to speak to founders, to revenue leaders, to marketing leaders from SaaS companies about the go-to-market side of events. I'm not going to talk to them about like how to choose the restaurant for your dinner. No, we're going to talk about why they're not able to confidently say how much revenue is being attributed to events, even if their gut feeling says yes, they work. That's what we're going to talk about and how to fix that. Where are the gaps? So I want more of that at marketing conferences, and I want more operators to be given voice. Because usually, where events would be mentioned is CMO talking up on stage and saying we leverage field events and they're very successful. But they're not the ones doing the job. They're not the ones dealing with the endless sales conversations and people being frustrated and actually connecting all those dots. They have the final product. And of course, they are the ultimate owner, but I think we need to hear more from the operators, not from the bird eye view.
Right.
That's what we want. And we want more senior leaders to listen to the operators to understand what are the challenges, how are these challenges being navigated, because that is when the change starts happening. And that is when your senior leadership starts seeing this role in a different way. The reason there are no dedicated events to event and field marketers, and the reason why even some of the event tech vendors, when they are creating their small side events, who are they inviting? They're inviting CMOs, they're inviting VP of marketing because they think, and in many ways it's true, these are the decision makers who are going to make a call on buying our software. But, and it's a twofold. One, they're not given enough credit to the actual operators, the actual doers about pushing for their software. And the other side is that companies are not giving enough credit and voice and leadership and strategic value to the event and field marketers. So it's a very
And
deep
that's the
rooted
whole
issue.
episode. Yeah, and that's
Yes.
our whole episode. I couldn't agree more. And I think if there, in my ideal world, there is a room or a track or a conference or a space community where the CMOs and the operators are each who own their zone of genius are in a room and finding those overlaps and where those strategy conversations are happening. I don't know that that exists yet, but that's sort of my dream. And I don't know quite yet how we actually make that happen, but I think that's an ideal for me, to your point.
Yeah. I think the shift is slowly and gradually happening because of
It is.
how in demand events are. I mean, we can even see last year I went to at that time still inbound, and it's been 6 years gap between the last event I attended. There was 2019. There was nothing about events. I couldn't get any side events because I was not prioritized. 2025, there are so many different topics that touch upon it. I am all of a sudden on a fast track to events and getting invites because that is seen as something of value, not just as a person who is moving roll-ups around the show floor.
Yeah,
So there is a
completely.
shift, but we want
It's
it
happening.
faster.
I do want it faster, yes, but I agree. There is a shift coming, and I think Inbound is doing it. I think Salesforce is starting to add some event
Mhm.
tracks in there, so it's definitely coming. It's coming.
Yeah.
We're just impatient. Well,
We've
I
been
want to
waiting for so long. Of course
so
we are.
long. Oh my gosh, so long we've been waiting. And I'm glad to see event people. And back up for just a second. One thing I found really interesting is field marketers consider themselves marketers, not event people. Even though a lot of what they do are events, smaller, larger regional events, but larger in terms of volume, how many they do, but they don't consider themselves event people. So they don't go to any of the event
No,
conferences, which
because
I've
they're not
always found
interesting. Because
correct.
that's not what your job is about. Yes, you organize it.
Exactly.
And I had the same. And the issue was the label event in your job title. I don't have a label event in my job title. I changed it because I didn't want to be associated with logistics and operations. And unfortunately, with all the respect, this is how it is being treated. I think now, again, now it's changing. Now I would have no issue with that because everybody understands within B2B company what that means. However, 5, 7 years ago, no, if you have an event, you are the girl moving roll-ups. But field marketer was like a marketer who has a seat at the table. That's why, because I was almost
Exactly.
like, the a label, and you don't want to be associated with that label.
Yeah, no, I completely agree. And to your point earlier, you said that field marketers are tied closer to sales, where
Yes.
events weren't ever tied that closely. And so having that event in your title just automatically put you in the doer operations
Yeah.
hierarchy of the organization. Unfortunately, that's just the way it went. But we are seeing the change and we're impatient. So event people show up with sales and marketing language, not event language. Okay, I
But
want
there's totally fine for events planners to stay event planners and be
to exactly.
respectful of the work that they do. So it's just a different context and different industry. Like event industry is not one thing, and I actually think event industry is more organizing events, right? And when we speak in the B2B marketing context, that is a different story. But I mean, how
Yeah.
else are you going to call it if it is an event? It's just so multifaceted. So
And I think that's the blessing and curse of this industry. It is all the different avenues and all the things it takes to do events and then tying them back into revenue. And we need amazing operators. We need amazing strategists. We need event data translators. We need data architects and technology. I mean, it's so multifaceted. I think that's why people have always struggled as an industry to wrap our head around, are we marketing? Are we sales? Are we go
yeah,
to market? Are we operators? Because honestly, we need all of them. Like just like marketing has marketing operations people, there's creatives, like everyone within a marketing org has their lane. Same with sales. You have sales ops, you have actual sales leaders, account managers, like everyone kind of has their
yeah,
lanes. And event people end up absorbing too many lanes.
yes.
Amazing. Well, I want to unpack because I think your event strategy and your portfolio is really interesting the way you structure it. And you even give it a name, Flow. So inside of your portfolio, you own flagship events, local meetups, community podcasts. You also support partnerships and ABX account management or account-based experience. Walk us through a little bit about the portfolio and why those things came together, because they all play so nicely together. And I see the connection, but I don't know a lot of people do. So walk us
Mhm.
through Flow.
Yeah, so Flow, that was a event name before I started with Pixelz. Actually, that was chosen before me, but it fit perfectly. It was also a connection to what the company does and to the way of the operations for that work. I'm not gonna go into details of what Pixelz does, because that will take quite some time. But the whole ecosystem of why it all lives together and why also account-based strategy and partnerships, because everything we do we run on account-based strategy, so events are a huge portion and a huge part of how we approach and how we reach the target accounts that we want to work with us. Events are a huge part of how we stay in touch and keep our customers more and more engaged and make them stay with us for many years. And events are also a way for our existing tech partners to show up together with us as an ecosystem, or it is a way for us to as well start a conversation with potential new partners and test that relationship. So that all ties really well together. And for me, that events, account-based marketing, partnerships, partner marketing, that usually when you think about partner marketing, it always starts with something of an event. What's the first thing that people do when they're like, oh, there's that partner. We should do a webinar together. It's always a webinar. It's always, oh, let's do a dinner together. It's always something. It's always the events. But when it's somebody else says that and then just throws the task into the event team and be like, execute that. We are doing it with a partner. The event team doesn't have a full understanding. These people don't have a full understanding what it means to run an event with a partner. And it's a very different story. And that actually is
Yes.
very complicated to make sure that the partner is happy, that we are happy, that it actually moved something somewhere, and we didn't end up never working ever again because that event was just completely exploded or didn't bring anything. So when I have the say in all of these areas, and I can be the one holding it together and seeing how we can connect the dots, that that changes the way we run it, that changes the potential impact of how we run things. And then with flow, and that actually changes every year because we like to keep things interesting, but also it is a direct reflection on what we are seeing, not just on the feedback survey, but what we are seeing on the revenue dashboards from these events. And some formats, they worked in 2023, but they're not working anymore in 2025. What worked in 2024, we did not carry over to 2026. And not because our audience didn't want that. No, they would love that. It is definitely a community that has been built around Flow through all of these touch points, but it is because we don't see we see how that revenue on the dashboard goes down, but we see what it works. But also then there are company objectives that have drastically shifted over the past 3 years, and that has happened to every single company because whether you like it or not, but AI is changing how everything is operating right now in the world. So if you're still running your strategy from 2 years ago, sorry, but there probably are flaws in it because of where your company is right now, what it needs. So all of it constantly comes into play. And well, yes, as a big thing, yes, that's what flow is. But there is always something that is changing. There are different levers that, almost as the orchestrator, I have a say of putting it up or putting it down, almost as if playing with the volume, like a DJ was all of these different plates that you have. So this is how it looks in a nutshell, which is pretty extensive explanation, but that's what it
No,
takes. It's never easy.
no, I love it. Do you intentionally then connect the dots? So let's give an example of
Mhm.
maybe there's an account that the sales team has been going after, so you invite them on the podcast, and then maybe that speaker does a session at an event you own, or maybe you bring them to do a little session inside your booth at a trade show. Is that kind of why you group them together? Because you can then create this big story arc that ultimately drives, revenue for the business.
Definitely. And that works if the person we know would be actually I would appreciate such invitation. And sometimes we know they want to say yes, but they will appreciate it. So, and then also the territories. Where are we hosting those events? How does the targeting work? What are the priorities? This. What's the content as well? What do we want? What the behavior change, right? The foundational principles of experience design, they remain the same, but you need to design it with all this business thinking in mind, not just an amazing event for the audience, but an amazing event for the audience, but also with the desired outcomes for the business.
Yeah, I love that. And you mentioned webinars, but webinars wasn't mentioned as part of the architecture of flow. So where do webinars fit in? Is it part of your team or a different team?
It is part of my team, so I own both in-person and digital experiences. And my team is, as you mentioned, extremely lean. We are just 8 people on the marketing team in general. I have one person who is absolutely brilliant, and we are a great combination together as well, because I know my zone of genius. So whenever I'm hiring, I know what areas I need to strengthen, where I need someone who will come in and who can fully take over it with minimal involvement from my side. So shout out to Julia, who's on my team. And but also our whole marketing team is deeply involved in everything that we do. So yes, we have dedicated areas of ownership, but ultimately we have such crossover and everyone is working on all of the initiatives that we are doing because we are such a lean team. We can't afford to do it any
Of
other
course.
way. So that's kind of split is not like okay, nobody else is touching it. No, we're all involved. But yes, digital and in-person experience. So in person it's mainly flow. Webinars, we are keeping out of flow ecosystem intentionally because we believe the whole power of flow is the in-person element and the fact that people are connecting together. However, what we're also seeing is the Flow community is much more receptive to our webinars and they always join. And when a lot of people from Flow community join, you just see familiar names in the chat. There start to be the conversation there. So it creates that and carries through in the online space as well. However, we are leveraging our online events and not just webinars. We also run virtual events for product focused topics much more and for sharing all the updates and industry updates in relation to our product through the webinar, uh, which is slightly different with Flow. Of course, we do as well mention what we do and who we are at Flow, but it is first and foremost event for the industry and for the community. It's not a Pixelz user conference. Whereas our webinars, you can say that this is Pixelz, this is what we do, this is our product.
I love that you kind of distinguish it live experience versus digital experience. But I think the one thing you said that sticks with me and why you guys have one of the best like event motions is the crossover. I think your lean team is actually one of your most benefits because I talked about this with Ashley Faust. She was on here. She wrote an entire book about the marketing funnel is dead. MQLs are gone. You shouldn't track those anymore because the buyer now has multiple touch points. This first or last attribution model, I think, just needs to go away. Like, it's not the reality of humans anymore. And I think you said at the beginning, it's kind of like the matrix and everything kind of touches everything else. And I think that's why your motion works so well is because of that crossover and collaboration, because every buyer needs multiple touch points. Like, they're not going through a funnel anymore. And know that you have some feelings on that and the MQL being dead. So walk us through how, with all these touch points now, live experiences through Flow, digital experiences with webinars and product marketing, how do you actually measure attribution and say the event did this when there's maybe 12 or 15 different touch points before they purchase?
And then also to address the crossover point, and that's very much related to how we measure the success of the events. We have a lot of crossover, and we do work while we are two separate teams with two separate leaders, sales and marketing, but our leaders really work together. We all work really together, and that's why these events work because we only run events that sales ones. As soon as there is an event that was not exactly like wished for by the sales team, we're not going to see the results from that. That's just, it's so basic and it's so easy to understand and yet so hard for majority of the companies. It keeps being decided by marketing and then pushed onto sales. And marketing runs it and expects sales to drive results. That's not going to happen. If sales did not have a say, if they did not want it, if they don't feel the shared ownership, there won't be results from your events, or there will be by chance, not by design. So, speaking of the outcomes and the attribution, when we're talking about events that are designed to support sales, there are only two metrics that matter is the pipeline and the closed won revenue. This is ultimately why you run events. Of course, they have a huge brand value and building trust and building relationship and recognition and all of these great things, but I'll never get tired of repeating that. Your events need to, at the very least, pay for themselves in revenue that they're generating so that you can afford all these good things. Because if you're constantly investing money, yes, the brand and all that is still there, but it becomes cost of doing business. It's a cost of doing brand, and it will get cut when things get tough. When the CFO appears at your event, that's when probably it's gonna get cut. But pipeline and closed one, you need to have at least one X and then higher depending on the way you look at it. So the metrics that we look at is primary closed one, which means that the deal hit pipeline after the event. They were at the event and they hit the pipeline after the event. So that's primary pipeline and then ultimately primary closed one. And of course, there are tons of other touch points because this is enterprise deal and this is a complex and long sales cycle. I mean, you would be just sorry stupid to think that one touch at an event and all of a sudden there is a closed one deal. That is possible if you run a PLG motion and people, get their credit card in right on the spot and they buy something that is $50 worth. Yes, and then you attribute it to the event. Running a PLG, running events at a PLG company, that is a different story. My focus has always been sales-led organizations, bigger deals, and that's where investing in events, especially like higher amounts, that where it makes sense. So, and then there is influenced revenue because the deals that have been already in pipeline, but then they come to the event and it got them unstuck, which is one of the core things, right? With events, it's rebuilding that trust and maybe having a conversation that really help to overcome different barriers. We are not attributing it as a primary, but we are still looking at it as the overall influenced pipeline and influenced closed one.
And how frequently are you looking at it? You mentioned enterprise deals; those always take sometimes months,
Yeah.
in a huge scenario, maybe years. So how are you measuring and reporting on ROI? Because a lot of times, as soon as the event is over, you want to give that post-event report of what happened, but you're not really going to know immediately 3 days after the event. So what does the timetable look like for your measurement on attribution?
For the post event, like immediate post event report, I like to show as well the amount of pipeline in the room. So the amount of the open deals that have been influenced, because that we already know this is how much pipeline came to our event. Like it's really nice to see the number of 1.5 million that was in one room, sitting together, talking to each other, listening to what we have to say. So that's one thing. But then, yes, comes the whole measurement. One thing I would say, depending on your sales cycle, you need to just come to an agreement internally. For how long are you measuring? What's your reporting window per event? We have agreed to make it simple on 12 months period so that primary closes within 12 months. Because our sales cycles are long and sometimes it takes a while for things to even resurface. So somewhat, that gives us a good option, but we never close that reporting completely. Everything that is compound that happens afterwards, we can still see it. And we have reports for all of the events, all the alerts on the deals or when the deal hits pipeline or when deal hits closed one, we get the alerts. So even for events that have been 2 years ago, 3 years ago, we can still get something and that gets attributed, but it's just not primary. But we know that, okay, came from that event. And of course, we also know that some people, and this is what the essence of building community, they come to multiple events and they come to different events. So the rule is that we attribute it to the first event that they attended unless it was like super long ago, and that's where it starts a little bit, it always will always get messy when it's so
Of course.
complicated. You need to make a
Yeah,
decision. If someone showed up 3 years ago but then there was nothing, but then they came to the event I don't know, last year, and after that they called the sales team and were like, we want to move forward, we really liked what you said there, or right now our company is there, your solution is at the right stage of evolution, let's do it. Then it's much more fair to attribute it to that recent event.
sure. The clock kind of starts over at that
Yeah,
point.
yeah.
That makes sense. And when you're measuring events, do you measure them each individually or do you group them, like field events get measured by region and you look at them quarter by quarter? Do you look at a whole portfolio of trade shows? Do you measure individually? Like walk us through looking at a broader picture versus did this event have ROI, that event have ROI, or
Mhm.
trade shows had ROI?
So that really depends on what's your structure as a company. And I've had very different scenarios right now at Pixelz. We have a relatively small program compared to some of the programs that I've run before, and we don't have such uh, differentiated buckets or, yeah, such scale in various regions, for example. But still, we can see what type of event, what format works better, which one works less, which regions are more receptive, and which locations will continuously deliver results for us. So we can definitely see it on the individual event level, on the format, let's say format level, and in territory. And that is something that you can always translate to bigger scale. And I used to run programs across measuring 4 different regions and four like, different types of events, or two, but very large scale. Like one was EMEA and one would be North America. And there, what kind of events? And yes, we can see that this type of events, like trade shows, are driving results in this market, but they're not performing in the other market. So we are going to completely shift, and you can be running very, very different programs for different market. I So you look at different levels, and depending on what kind of conversation you're having and what kind of thinking, you want to know the specific events, which ones are performing, but you also want to make sure that the overall investment per event portfolio is performing and is driving impact, because I also know that some of the smaller meetups may not necessarily be driving huge amount of revenue, but they were essential to ensure that our attendance for the flagship event, where we poured majority of our investments, was as good as it was, because people need to build trust, and they need to build recognition, and need to have multiple touch points, and then they all show up at the big event. They already love you. They love you even more because of that experience. They're super receptive to your offer, and that's when everything clicks. Would it happen without the previous 2, 3 meetups? Maybe
Maybe.
yes, but maybe not. But my gut feeling says maybe not. And once you've earned your credibility with consistently driving revenue, your gut feeling becomes a little bit more respected in a conversation as well.
Yeah, completely agree. Okay, one thing as we're wrapping up here, the way people are planning is changing. And you mentioned if you're still using the same strategy from 2 years ago, it's probably not working for you. And one of the things I see a lot of struggling in the industry is the for profit show, the business of events, basically. They want you to sign up for their next year's trade show at this year's trade show. Before it's even over, they're like, here's your contract for next year. But that doesn't really work anymore. And you've mentioned you're planning more in like 6 month windows. So what are we going to do the second half of the year? You're probably thinking about now. How does that change with actually working with some of these show organizers that you don't own the event? Like, how do you navigate that when booth space might sell out before you guys make the decision to go to that program?
Don't buy the booth. That's it. Honestly, there are so many different ways how to either participate if you really know you want to be part of that trade show, you've been a part of that trade show before, you know the audience. You don't always need the booth to be successful, and the prices are so high. I don't want to kind of be that person, but I'm not a big fan of trade shows. I think they are mostly old school, and the ones that are not old school, they're good ones, but they're so insanely expensive. They only truly financially make sense for a very narrow segment of companies that either have a super huge prospect base and target audience percentage that matches with the event participants is super high. Like, I would give an example of Semrush, for example, where I used to lead global events. Uh, like, the audience is huge. You know, there were millions of customers. So, of course, coming to a B2B marketing show like Inbounds made sense because every single person who walks the floor is a potential customer of a different level. Someone will go and buy individual subscription of the website, but someone will talk about enterprise contract for 200 seats with your sales team. That makes sense. But when you are a narrow audience company, that the math just isn't mathing basically there.
Yeah.
So just pivot, like be creative about your strategy. Like, that's what I'm saying. If 2 year you've always sponsored that show inside that contract on the floor, we've never done it even back before COVID. That was a rule. We never sign for the events on the spot for the next year. We need to reevaluate everything. And right now, even more so.
Yeah, agreed. So, what do you think? You have a crystal ball 5 years from now, the event teams that are surviving and thriving, what are they doing right now and over the next 5 years to really show that events are moving the needle for their business?
So I don't have a crystal ball. I do have a magic 8 ball, which is pretty much
Close
the
enough.
same level of efficiency when it comes to 5 year term. That's very far away. 5 years ago, it was 2021, COVID, we were all digital events. Companies like Hopin were thriving. Um, and the in-person was sort of kind of reviving and so on. So 5 years, right? Where is Hopin? The virtual events, they went down and now they're going back up, but in a different, like in a reimagined way, the most popular word of COVID. So 5 years is going to be a huge difference. And I think
Yeah.
the teams that are going to be thriving in 5 years, what they're going to look like, what exactly they're going to be doing, no one can tell right now. We know that. One thing we know, in-person experiences will remain. This is, I think no one will argue with that right now. It will remain super, super important. I think the teams that understand how to leverage in-person experiences without getting stuck in the patterns of trade show, roadshow, user conference, executive dinner, these are the teams that will thrive because what the human relationships building looks like for brands is different. I think the brand experience, as much as I am about revenue focused events, I think the brand experience events will become more and more important, and companies will start investing more in events that are not necessarily an executive dinner, but like what we've seen from Anthropic sponsoring a coffee shop and all things like that. But they will be part of a portfolio that together works and delivers 2, 3, 5x ROI on the investment. So it all funnels together. So it's not like I'm against brand events. I love brand events and getting creative, but they need to make sense in combination with everything else. So I think this part will definitely get stronger. And the teams will get leaner, no other way around that. That I think is what every single industry is seeing and every single team is seeing. The operations and logistics, especially in the context of B2B marketing teams, like what we're talking about this difference,
Uh-huh.
uh, they will they will become less of your day-to-day job. So that's good news for people like me. Well, but we need to find ways to how to change it, how to use AI to actually do it in the right way. Much bigger aspect of coordination of oper not operations, not event operations, but this go-to-market operations, how everything connects the dots. So that is definitely where things are going from where I see it. And I actually think like that getting unstuck from the patterns that we're used to to operate in is one of the most important aspects here because that is not just getting unstuck, but that is rebuilding and reformulating what this role ultimately is about. Whether it is going to be cold event and field marketing, probably that just gets kind of labeled, this gets stuck, and
Sure.
it's easier to keep it. But the essence will change, but leaving that core of in-person experiences drive growth. So that's the core. How these experiences look, what is being part of your portfolio? That is a question.
I completely agree with you. And I think at the end of the day, experiences, we're seeing more analog engagements and people wanting to get out of their houses and get into events, but the events have to matter for them to want to leave their house to do that. Amazing.
For
Okay,
sure.
well, this I pulled three random curiosity cards. We're going to close out.
Nice.
So you get to pick one, two, or three, and this will be our final question.
Let's do one.
One. What is your favorite family tradition?
Ooh, favorite family tradition. Um, Hard to say. I almost feel like we don't necessarily have many traditions, but I'll go with the New Year's Eve because I'm originally from Russia, if you can tell from my name, and we don't really celebrate Christmas, but New Year's Eve is a big, big thing. And I that's my favorite holiday, and I have certain traditions on that day for sure that I kind of got my husband into. So he didn't have traditions around New Year, so I had no choice. Um, and yeah, that's probably would be the most traditional thing that I do throughout the whole year.
Okay, give us one of your New Year's Eve traditions.
So, apart from being from Russia, I'm also from Kamchatka originally, which is very close to Japan. And it's the first region of Russia that kind of celebrates the new year because of the time difference.
Okay.
So, wherever I am in the world, I always kind of that's when the whole celebration starts. So we always celebrate and open a bottle of champagne, and if I can, we call my parents, and we kind of celebrate that together. Usually it's like 2 or 3 p.m. for me, my time right now.
That's amazing. Well, I'm going to have to steal some of those traditions. Well, Aleksandra, thank you for being here. I probably could talk to you for another hours and hours on end. I hope that we get a chance to meet in person one day, and maybe in a world, I'm imagining that we get to share a stage and at a marketing conference and talk all things events and GTM and ABX and all the things we love. But thank you so much for being here. That's all the time we have for today. Thanks for tuning in to another Event About It after show, because the best conversations start after the show ends. Until next time, stay curious.